Hello, guys. I know it's been a minute. But I wanted to hop on and just share some things that God was teaching me earlier. So, man, I don't even know. I think I posted my last video. I don't know. It's been a few months, seriously. But I figured, you know what? There's no time like the present to get on and to just talk about God's word. So I figured I would get on and share what I shared on my Bible study this morning in hopes that it would help someone else too. So here I am. For those of you who have been to my channel before, you know me. My name is Kayla. For those of you who haven't, my name is Kayla. And about a year and a half ago, I quit my job. And it was at God's leading. And I felt that He was telling me to share what it is that happens along this journey of the faith walk. So, this is primarily what I've been sharing on my YouTube channel. So, I go in and out and I'll share a little bit and then I'll kind of fall back. But here I am again, okay, to share again. So, again, if you're watching the replay or you're new to my channel, my name is Kayla JoLynn. I host a Bible study weekly, typically on Thursdays for Full Circle Faith. Sorry, my alarm. It's a community for women of God who are walking by faith. And in this community, we are encouraging each other to continue the faith walk and continue to do the thing that God has called us to do. Now, that may look different for each person, but it's still important and it's still worth doing. So, that's what the community is about. And like I said, we host it on Thursdays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. So if you would like to join, you can go to fullcirclefaith.com to check it out. Let's see what else here. All right. So what we'll be talking about today and what I spoke about a little bit this morning is seeking the kingdom and the importance of doing so, right? What does it mean to seek the kingdom? What does it mean to walk by faith? What does it mean to live righteously as a daughter of God? These are the themes that God has been talking to me about a lot lately, and it's been on my heart. And I just had to share it because I know it's something that'll help someone else. And I know that there are many people who are embarking on this new journey and they're walking by faith. They're doing what God is calling them to do, but they may still not fully understand what it is to live kingdom and what it is to live righteously. So, again, this is what's been on God's heart that He's been talking to me about. And I wanted to come on and be able to share it with you all. So, I found myself reading First Kings, First Kings chapter 18 and chapter 19, right? So this is where I'll be coming from. First Kings 18 and chapter 19. So just to give you a little bit of a background, right? In First Kings chapter 18, it's talking about this time period where Elijah, he's been tucked off, hidden away with God, and God calls him to the forefront. He calls him out and says, hey, it's time to reveal yourself again. It's time to present yourself, right? So this theme in First Kings 18 is a theme of isolation, presentation, and demonstration, okay? So Elijah was isolated, doing what God was calling him to do in a season, and God took care of him. Then he was told, okay, now it's time to present yourself to King Ahab. Present yourself and let him know that, I'm going to be sending rain. So he gets out of hiding. He presents himself to King Ahab and he decides to have the showdown, right, at God's leading. And the showdown is between the false prophets of Baal and God's true prophet, which was Elijah. So, and again, this is just a quick synopsis of it. So Elijah has them go to the top of the mountain. He's like, we're going to set these altars up. You set an altar up for your gods. I'm going to set an altar for my God, the one true God, right? The King of Kings. And when we do this, we'll see which God answers. We'll see which God actually burns up the offering and brings fire from heaven. So, of course, the false prophets are praying all day. They're trying to get their gods to move. Their gods aren't doing anything. Elijah begins to mock them, like, well, maybe they're asleep. Maybe they're using the bathroom. Like, maybe you missed them. And then, when it's Elijah's turn, he pops up. And, of course, He sets the altar up, he sets the scene, he has the offering, he has them even douse water on the offering, and all around the offering, right? And then he prays. And Elijah's heart is that it will be seen and it will be known that he serves the one true God, and that what Elijah is doing is what God has asked of him. So, he calls on the Lord sends down fire from heaven in this huge display of his glory, burns up the offering, burns up the stones, burns up the water, like the whole nine, right? At Elijah's prayer. And even in this, right? Even in this, after this, well, I'll say he took care of the false prophets. He took them out. But even after this, they still weren't really, really willing to recognize that God was the one true God. They were not willing to really surrender their hearts and turn back towards the Lord. And even in this, God still ended up sending the rain. He honored his word and he sent the rain. But because of their disobedience and because of their wickedness, King Ahab and Jezebel, they still were against God and they were against Elijah. So they're like, you know what? In chapter 19, they're coming after Elijah. Jezebel was like, I'm going to kill you. Mark my words. Like, it's going to happen. So this amazing prophet of God, one who stands in the face of, all these false prophets, finds himself running from Jezebel, on the run. Okay. So he went from isolation to presentation to this massive demonstration of God's glory, then to being on the run. Just the chapter over. So in this next chapter 19, there's this running theme of restoration and revelation. So Elijah is running from Jezebel. He has his servant. He drops his servant off in one city, and he continues further in on his journey to go. He's like further into the wilderness, and he goes and sits under a tree, and he's like lamenting and frustrated, and just talking to God, like, you know what, Lord, just take me out. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Like, I'm done. I did what you asked. I showed up, and I'm tired because nothing worked. I really believe that Elijah thought that, their hearts were going to be changed towards God, and that they would, side with him, and that they would, turn their hearts, right, and do the right thing. But that's not what happened. So it left Elijah feeling like, well, what am I doing? What is the purpose of my journey? What's the purpose of me, following God and speaking these things on God's behalf if the people aren't listening, if they don't want to hear it, if they're not showing up, if they're not turning their hearts towards God? So Elijah was feeling real defeated, right? He was feeling defeated. He was being chased down, and he just was like, I'm just going to sit right here. So while he's doing that, God, in his tenderness and his father-like ways towards us, sends what Elijah needs. He sends and tends to his physical needs, right? Before even getting into the spiritual, and before even going to speak about, what Elijah could be doing or should be doing, he tends to his physical needs. So God sends an angel to bring him food and water. So food and water. And he does this twice because he cares about Elijah and he cares about his physical needs. Even though Elijah wasn't, he was feeling real defeated. He's feeling dejected. He doesn't want to do it anymore. He's just over it. Like, God, take me out. But God doesn't address all that. He addresses the physical needs, seeing that his son is tired, seeing that, he's afraid. He's like, let me help you rest. Let me feed you and allow you to rest. So once he does this, it's time for Elijah to get up, and he continues on his journey to Mount Horeb. So he's on this journey, right? This journey to meet with God. Now he's out of position on this journey because he is running from Jezebel. And, God hasn't given us the spirit of fear. He hasn't called us to run from the enemy. He gives us what we need and equips us to be able to face the enemy so that we can speak the word of God into any situation and rule it and reign in it, just like you would in a kingdom, right? So Elijah finds himself out of position in the first place, just by the fact that he's running from Jezebel. So he's on his way to this mountain, right? He's on his way, and he tucks himself, when he gets there, he tucks himself in a little cave. And now that God has fed him and tended to his physical needs, he presents him with a question, and this is in First Kings chapter 19, verse 9. It says, "And he came into a cave and lodged there, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said unto him, What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here?" How many times has God asked you that? How many times have you started out on the right path? You're doing what God has called you to do. You've been in the seasons of isolation. You've done the pruning. You've been presented, right, in the position and the place that God has set you. You see this wonderful demonstration of God's glory. And then somewhere along the way, you start to feel rejected because things didn't turn out the way you thought. And you feel discouraged because it's not happening in your time, in your time frame. And you find yourself outside of the place that God says you should be. What are you doing there? And this is the question that God is posing even now. It's like, where do you find yourself along the journey? Are you doing the thing that God has asked you to do? Are you operating from a place of fear as you're doing it? Do you find yourself retreating because you feel like the enemy is just going too hard? Where do you find yourself? So this is the question that God had posed to Elijah. And Elijah, in his vulnerability and transparency with God, as his father, he says, Lord, I'm out here doing what you've called me to do by your will, by your name. And yet your children, Israel, has forsaken you. They've disrupted and thrown down your altars. They are killing the real prophets, and they've just forsaken you. And I'm the only one left. I'm the only one remaining, and they're trying to kill me. The enemy is trying to kill me. I love that Elijah is so honest and so open with God. He's like, regardless of, the fact that what I'm feeling may not be accurate, is what I feel. And I have the type of relationship with God that I can tell him transparently what I actually feel and what I actually think. That's so indicative of the relationship that they had. And it's like God, he wants that with us today as his daughters, even as his sons. When we talk to God, he wants us to be vulnerable and open and willing to speak what we really feel, even if it's not right. God can handle our questions. He can handle our frustration. He can for sure handle the disappointment. He can handle it. So we can give that to him and be transparent, just like Elijah was here. So he speaks this, he says, what he's feeling. And the Lord, has him come forward, and he's like, let me show you something. Right. And so this is around verse 11 and 12. So when he has Elijah come forward, he basically, this is what happens. He shows him the wind. He sends this mighty wind, and this wind breaks up the rock and breaks it down into little rocks. Then he sends this earthquake, and it shakes everything up. Then he sends fire, right? But he says, I'm not in any of that. I am the still small voice that you hear. So this is what God told him. This is what God told Elijah. Like, I know you're waiting for the big thing. I know you saw the fire come down from heaven. So you're expecting these big displays of my glory, but don't miss me. Don't miss me. My voice is that still small voice you hear in the everyday and the mundane, and the going to work and the coming home and all the things, right, that we do throughout our day. God's still small voice wants to be with us through all of it. It's not just in the big moments. It's not just in the worship. It's not just in the praise. It's not just in the service where you're getting all this, revelation and prophecy. It's not. God, his voice is so still and so small. You have to be quiet to listen. You have to be willing to submit yourself to actually hear what he's saying to you. And this is what he was showing to Elijah. So he shows him this, and then he asked Elijah again, what are you doing here? So this, again, is just signifying, God is reiterating here that where Elijah is out of position. He should be on his way doing the things that God has called him to do, yet he's hiding out, and yet he's retreating out of fear. So Elijah, again, being transparent, says the same thing he said the first time. Father, I'm serving you. I'm doing what you've called me to do, but your children aren't. They've forsaken you. They've torn down your altars. They're killing your prophets. And only I am left. He was feeling alone. Elijah thought that it was just him. How many times have you felt like you're the only one standing for what's right? You're the only one standing for God's word, willing to show up and put yourself out there. Well, let me tell you, you are not the only one. You're not alone. And just like Elijah, there are many people that are waiting to come along and support you and waiting to be the help that you need. So a few verses down, let's see. A few verses down in verse 18, God is telling Elijah, I actually have 7,000 in Israel. 7,000 of my people, my children are there in Israel. And this was the answer to Elijah continuing to say that he was the only one left. Have you said that before? Have you said, Lord, it's just me. I'm alone out here. I don't have any help. Nobody's supporting me. I've done what you've asked me to do, and yet there's no one who's taking part in it. Well, God is saying, hey, you're not alone, daughter. You're not alone, son. I have people tucked away just for you, waiting for you, ready for you to show up and get back in position. They're there. Now, the enemy wants to show you everything but that. He wants to show you that you're alone. He wants to show you and make you think that you're the only one going through a thing, but we know that's not true. God is with us first and foremost, so we're never alone. And he also has sent the people that we need to be there for us when we get in the right position, just like with Elijah. And the beautiful thing about this is like, by Elijah being in position and doing the thing that God was calling him to do, he allowed for other people to get in position, right? He made a way for that to happen. So down here, again, 1 Kings 19 1 Kings 19, verse 15. So in verse 15, the Lord is saying, hey, return, get back on your way, right? Get back on the path that you're supposed to be on. And then he sent them out to anoint 3 people, 2 of which would become king and 1 of which would become his apprentice. Now, had Elijah not got back in position and done the thing that God called him to do, then his protege, Elisha with the S, would not have been able to be in his rightful position to follow and learn under him. It would have never happened if Elijah chose to stay on the run or chose to stay out of position and stay feeling, just feeling defeated, right? Feeling discouraged. If he would have chose to stay there, he would have been a part of keeping someone else out of alignment. And I'm so thankful that God helps us. I'm so thankful that he gets us right back on track. He doesn't allow us to stay feeling defeated or to stay in lack or to stay in, this feeling of rejection. He teaches us and shares his heart with us and says, no, it's not so. Whatever the enemy is telling you is all lies. I have the people you need tucked away. Now let's get you back on your journey so that you can help the next person get in position. And this is our commission. This is our call as kingdom women and kingdom men, and we're living by God's kingdom. We are to be in position. We are to reign and to rule. So when God first began explaining this to me, it's something simple, but it's one of those things we need reminded about sometimes. I was wondering why he was talking to me about kingdom living and living righteously, even in the context of Elijah, when Elijah wasn't the king, right? Ahab was the king at this time. But what God was showing me, it's not so much about actually being a king, ruling over something. You're to live in the kingdom. We're to be a part of kingdom living and to live righteously. Just like it tells us in Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So even Elijah, even though he wasn't the king, he was still to be living in a kingdom manner. He was supposed to be living in a way that was pleasing to God. And so are we. When we live in the kingdom, And I looked this up because I was like, let me just break this down a little bit. Okay, so I was looking up kingdom and righteousness. So I looked this up right in the Greek, and in the Greek it's Strong's G 932. But kingdom means royal power, kingship, dominion. It's the right or the authority to rule over a kingdom. And righteousness is Strong's G 1343, and it's the state of him who is as he ought to be. So kingdom living is to rule with royal power and kingship, dominion and authority over a thing, and to stand in the manner that we ought to be. So when we are as we ought to be, doing the thing that God has called us to do in a condition that's acceptable to God, we are living righteously. We're living with integrity and virtue and purity of life. The other thing that righteousness means, it's correctness of thinking, feeling, and action. So not only is it important to just remain in a state where we are as we ought to be, we also need to think as we ought to think. To be kingdom minded and to live in this kingdom that God speaks of and to seek this kingdom that God speaks of, we have to be ready to rule and reign and also in our minds with the right thoughts, so that the way we present ourselves in a situation is coming with the mind of Christ. We're to do it with excellence, and not to say that we're going to be perfect at it, because we won't be. But we know how to live as we ought to, right? We know how to be found in right standing with God. That's what it means to live righteously. It's rather simple when you kind of break it down like that. So even in Elijah's case, when he was in right position, where God sent him, doing what God was calling him to do, he was living righteously. He was in right standing with God and living as he ought to live. This was just so good because, it just makes it so simple for us to do. And don't confuse simple and easy, because it's not always easy, but it is rather simple. When we're living in alignment with what God has called us to do and where he's called us to be and who he's called us to be, we are living in right standing with God. And when we seek the kingdom, that means we're seeking to rule the way God has called us to rule, with royal power and kingship, with dominion and authority over the things that God has placed in our hands. So whether that's your business, whether that's, raising a family, whether that's on your job, whether it's with your ministry, however that looks, we are to rule and to reign, right? As God's daughters, as his sons, we are to rule and reign just like him and be found in right standing with God. This just blessed me so much because, when you're walking by faith, sometimes you don't always know exactly what to do. And I'm thankful that God makes it simple. He does not make it complicated for us. I love that even in the different seasons that we find ourselves in, whether you're in a season of isolation, presentation, demonstration, restoration, or revelation, wherever you find yourself along your journey, God is like, I'm right here with you. I'll show you the way. I'll show you how to live righteously and live according to my word. All you have to do is stay in right standing with me. Live as you ought to live. Be who you ought to be. And God makes it clear for each one of us. We're to emulate Jesus. We're to be like him in the things that we do. So we do rule and reign with authority. We don't have to be defeated. We don't have to feel rejected. When we stand up and do the things that God calls us to do, we just have to remember that we don't always see the full picture. We don't always know, everything. So what God's been showing me is when you're in a situation and it doesn't make sense or it doesn't look great, just put a yet on the end of that. This doesn't make sense to me yet. This isn't what I thought it would look like yet. The people I thought would support me haven't supported me yet. Put a yet on the end of those sentences, because you want to allow space for God to do what he said he would do, for him to come in, for him to help you, for him to finish the sentence, right? And finish the story in your life. If the thing is not good yet, it's not done. God is not done with you. He's not done with your assignment. He's not done with the things that he's called you to do or who he's called you to be. There's process attached to it, and God is working those things out. So even when it doesn't look like what you think it should look like yet, know that God is not done working. He's not done working. And if you submit yourself to him and you're transparent and honest with him, he can show you what's next. He can give you strategy. He can give you understanding on what to do and where to go. It's such a beautiful thing. It's such a freeing thing. And the other thing that God pointed out to me was in John 15:16. Let me go to it here. John 15, verse 16. It says, "You've not chosen me, but I've chosen you and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever you shall ask for in my name, he may ask of the Father in my name, he may give you." So this, God was showing me, just like it was back then, and even when it was with Elijah, I had chose him for the assignments I placed in his hand for him to rule. I chose him for that season and for that time. And God is saying to us now, I've chosen you too. I've chosen you for this assignment. I've chosen you to be this woman. I've chosen you to stand for my word. We didn't choose him. He chose us, which means he will provide us with what we need to bear good fruit. We don't have to run. We don't have to feel fearful. We don't have to feel intimidated by the unknown. We can rest in the fact that God chose us for this. He chose you for this work. Whatever that looks like for you, he chose you for it. You are capable. You are more than able to complete the things that God has begun in you. It's not over yet, right? I hope this encourages you because, again, when you're walking by faith and you're trying to live kingdom, you're trying to live by the kingdom and live righteously, sometimes you can feel like, I don't know if I can do this, or I've done it, but it didn't turn out the way I expected, so I should just give up. But this really encouraged me to know that, you don't have to give up. You don't have to go hide out in a cave, right? You can still do what God has called you to do and just allow him the space and the time to complete the thing, to make it good for you. Initially, it may not look good. It may not feel good. You may not see, how everything will pan out and how everything will work out, but know that God's got you and he hasn't given up on you. And he's not finished yet. He's not finished with the thing that he's called you to do. He is still helping you. And even though you feel alone, there are people tucked away waiting for you to show up. They are waiting to help you. They are waiting to support you. They are waiting to be a part of the things that God has placed in your hand for you to rule and reign over. It's only a matter of time before that shows up and before the situation changes. And all this, the in between, the waiting, will seem like such a distant memory. God's not done. So just like he encouraged Elijah and prepared him and gave him new revelation on the season he was in and showed him the next steps to take, God will do the same thing for you. He will give you revelation and understanding on what he's calling you to do next and whose life you are meant to impact. And he will send you right to them. So don't give up. God's got you. He is not done. And even when things look tough, it's never what they seem. Trust God with the ending of a thing. Trust him with the rest of the story. He will make it good. And when you're able to do that, you will be living kingdom life. You will be seeking the kingdom and living righteously. So don't give up. Don't think that it's over. Don't think that, just because it doesn't look good yet, that it's the end. Because it's not. Not until God has the final word on a thing. So y'all, this is what I wanted to share with you guys today. Like I said, we talked about it a little bit more in depth this morning on Bible study, which was 7 a.m. And it was really great. And I just had to share it because I knew it was something that would encourage his daughters. I knew it would be something that would encourage his daughters to really continue to stand for the things of God, not to retreat when it doesn't look great, but know that God is going to shift the situation. He's going to give you a fresh strategy and new revelation on what he's calling you to do and who you are meant to impact. So again, I hope this encourages you as you go throughout your day and even throughout your week to know that God's got you. And, wherever you find yourself and whatever season you find yourself in, know that God is going to take care of you and He's going to finish the story with an exclamation point. Okay. It's not just, oh, I'm going to be tucked over here, not doing what I thought I would do or not having things turn out the best way. No, things will turn out the way God has intended them to. Allow Him to finish your story. Don't call a thing prematurely. Failure is not even failure to God, okay? He can't fail. And He's living big on the inside of you. He's working with you and in you and through you to help you accomplish the things that He's called you to do. So keep seeking the kingdom first and living righteously. He set it up for you to be able to do it and to be able to succeed in everything that you put your hands to. So again, I hope this encourages you. I'm going to try to pop on more often and go live. Hopefully, that's my intention. So y'all got to hold me to it. But at least once a week so that I can go on and just share what it is that God has put on my heart. Now, typically I do share this in my Bible study in the mornings. I've been doing them on Thursdays at 7 a.m. and then 7 p.m. is our community chat, which we will be doing in the next few hours here. But just to talk about the faith walk and to share what God is doing in our lives, and just really be able to encourage each other with our own personal stories of the faith walk. So if you would like to join it or be a part of it, like I said, you can go to fullcirclefaith.com and drop your email. That way you can get the Zoom links for us. It is free, but it's a community that is just for women of God walking by faith. So I hope this encourages you, and I look forward to hopping back on more often. Yeah, God bless y'all. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.